Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the Thursday Night Football Showdown Slate for tonight on Draftkings. And look, I'm not one to complain about there being football on, but this is a pretty horrendous game. Like last week, I was kind of half complaining about the Jaguars facing the Dolphins. I would take that game 10 out of 10 times given the choice between the Jets Broncos or the Dolphins Jaguars, because there's just not really anything exciting in this game. I don't really want to sign up to watch Sam Darnold and Brett Rippon face off for 60 minutes, and the receiving options aren't all that great. I mean, there's a couple of guys that are decent, but it's just a lot to be desired here. Not looking forward too much, and I'm not even sure if Jets and Broncos fans are looking forward to this game either. And only, like I said, only a 40-point over/under, which to put in perspective, a lot of implied team totals for the Sunday slate are well above 30. Like the Seattle Seahawks are over 30, the Dallas Cowboys are over 30. The Cardinals are close to it. There's some other teams as well. Then you had the Packers on Monday Night Football, which are, I think, at around 32 or 33 for their implied team total. So over under a 40 is pretty gross, and both these teams just really aren't that impressive. But hey, it's still football nonetheless, so we'll power through it, and we have some DFS to play. So of course we're going to be excited. But I will say, and if the NFL is lucky that fantasy football exists, because if there wasn't, I don't really think many people are watching this game. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit the subscribe button. We're all season long trying to help you guys become better NFL DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you don't follow me on social media, my handle's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you miss more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated, and it is the first of the month, so if you were waiting, this is the best time to do it because Patreon does charge you on the day you sign up and on the first of the month. So if you sign up on the first of the month, you're golden. So if you're interested, links down below for that. You can also hop into the Discord chat as well. But if you're not, that's fine. But let's just dive into tonight's slate. So as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and both of these guys just... it doesn't feel great paying over 10K for these guys, but given it's a showdown slate, we're going to have some interest in the quarterbacks because they're always the safest plays for the most part. But man, these guys are, I wish they were in the 9K range. It would make it feel a little bit better. But there's actually quite a few good value plays like on the slate that are like $200, and I think I want to say $1,800 or $1,600, and a couple of other guys as well. So we can definitely fit these guys in. And Sam Darnold, look, it's gross. The Jets have an 18.75 implied team total here. They're 2.5-point dogs at home. And he's 10,600, and his numbers this season have not been good at all. He hasn't topped 12.2 fantasy points. The first game he had 12.2, 11.9, and 9.7. I will give him a little bit of leeway here, though. He has faced the Colts, 49ers, and the Buffalo Bills, which all have some pretty solid defenses. So the matchup versus Denver is going to be the easiest matchup he's had yet this season. And if we're looking at their overall matchup numbers, they're 26 DVA versus the pass, allowing 21.8 Draftkings points per game to quarterbacks, 296 passing yards per game, nearly 2.5 passing touchdowns per game, and actually a slight offensive line versus defensive line pass blocking advantage in matchup as well. So Darnold, look, the numbers aren't pretty for him, but the matchup's okay, and it looks like he might get Jamison Crowder here, which is going to be a boost for him as well. On the season, though, Darnold's numbers, less than 200 passing yards per game, only 5.9 yards per attempt, only a 61% completion percentage. Doesn't really do much on the ground either, and only one passing touchdown per game. So the numbers are ugly, but I think he's fine. I think you're going to have to throw some of these quarterbacks in for the flex spot just because that's how showdown slates pretty much go, and they are the safe play, especially in cash games. So Sam Darnold, I think he's fine. The matchup's all right. Then Brett Rippon at 10,200. Who the heck is Brett Rippon? That's a fair question. And he got in last game because Jeff Driscoll just really wasn't doing that well, so they threw Rippon in there. And he actually completed 8 of his 9 passes. It was only for 53 yards, threw a pick, didn't get a touchdown. But, I mean, he did okay. He completed some passes, and this is a pretty good matchup versus the Jets. Now, the Jets have been pretty strong versus the run this season. I think they're third DVA versus the run. But versus the pass, and the DVOA department, they're struggling quite a bit there. They're 31st DVA versus the pass, which is second worst. 20.5 Draftkings points allowed per game to quarterbacks, 250 passing yards per game, 1.67 passing touchdowns per game, and not really many interceptions as well. And look, we do not have really much of a big sample size here for Brett Rippon. It's mainly just a matchup versus the Jets, and the Jets typically like to get trampled, so I think Rippon might be okay here. Now, he doesn't have Cortland Sutton to throw the ball to, but he's got Jerry Jeudy, he's got KJ Hamler, he's got Noah Fant, he's got Melvin Gordon out of the backfield. Maybe Phillip Lindsay plays, I'm not sure. He's still questionable, but I don't think Rippon's the worst play in the world. We'll see how it goes. I don't expect anything too crazy, but they do have the higher team total here at 21.25. They're also slight favorites. I don't think it's the worst play in the world. And if you can fit both in your flex spot, I'd feel probably pretty good with that. Just because getting quarterbacks in my showdown lineup, I usually feel pretty good about doing that. So yeah, you're going to have to view them as some of the best plays on the slate. If this was like a main slate, we're not even going to be mentioning these guys. But given a showdown slate, they have to be mentioned and they are playable. We move on to the running back position. And up top, we have Melvin Gordon at $11,000. He is by far the most expensive running back here. And to be honest, he's not been that good at all. Like, just looking at his game log, he scored 16.6, 16.4, and 7.8. Now, his first two games, he's lucky he found the end zone because he just really wasn't that impressive. 19 rushing attempts for 70 yards, 15 rushing attempts for 78 yards. Then last week versus Tampa Bay, it was a pretty tough matchup, but still 8 rushing attempts for 26 yards and a couple of targets, or 6 targets, I should say. That's not that bad. He also had 3 targets the first 2 games. The problem is, if Philip Lindsay comes back, that's going to make it more of a timeshare instead of Melvin Gordon getting all the work. And if it's a timeshare, $11,000 for Melvin Gordon is a little bit much to pay for him. And I don't even feel that great paying $11,000 for him if Philip Lindsay doesn't play. Now, given a showdown slate, he's going to be the high volume running back. The Jets are pretty much running a three-man rotation there, so getting the bell cut running back on this slate, a guy that's probably going to get around 20 touches, is probably a smart way to go. In the matchup versus the Jets, like I said, they're pretty high in the DVOA department. They're third DVOA versus the run, but they are allowing 30.7 Draftkings points per game to running backs and over 100 rushing yards per game. Now, keep in mind, the Jets are typically getting blown out, so this just tends to have teams run the ball at the end of the game just because they're leading by so much, so that can be a bit skewed. But I still think we can definitely use running backs versus them. Now, I don't expect the Broncos to come out here and just kill the New York Jets. I mean, it's only a 2.5 point spread. But I think Melvin Gordon's all right there. It's just you're going to have to monitor the injury news on Philip Lindsay, because if he's out, it makes Melvin Gordon a pretty solid, safe play. If Lindsay's in and he's going to get his normal workload, it's going to be quite a split there. So something we'll have to monitor. But if Lindsay is out, we can definitely have some interest in Melvin Gordon. 14 rushing attempts per game so far, 4 targets per game. Now, the other numbers aren't that great, but he's still got 11% target share, so he'll be playable, and he's still playable even if Philip Lindsay plays, but it definitely muddies the waters up a bit. Now, the Jets running back situation is something that's pretty awful. You got Frank Gore, you got Kalen Ballage, and you got Pirine here at $1,800. Now, Frank Gore obviously is going to be the lead back here. He's going to get the most touches, and I swear Frank Gore is just never going to quit. I mean, the guy, every single year, he finds a way to get plenty of carries in an offense, no matter who the running back is. Now, obviously, this is because Le'Veon Bell was hurt, but still, Frank Gore, with Le'Veon being out, he had 21 rushing attempts in week 2, 15 rushing attempts in week 3. Obviously, not going to be really involved in the passing game. He did have 2 targets in week 2 and 1 target in week 3, but you really can't expect him to get much work in the passing game. But if he's going to get us 15-plus touches here versus the Denver Broncos, I don't hate it. They're 14th DVA versus the run this season, allowing 21 DraftKings points per game to running backs, 98 rushing yards per game. It's not great, and also there's a huge disadvantage here for the Jets, according to PFF, for the run blocking advantage match, or the run blocking disadvantage matchup, I should say. So that's also a concern. But at 6,400, you're going to get some volume here. I don't think Frank Gore is the worst play in the world, but I'll tell you right now, it's never exciting playing Frank Gore. You're just kind of hoping he chugs along for 60, 70 yards, and he finds the end zone once or maybe twice if you get really, really lucky. So keep that in mind when you roster Frank Gore, but the volume should be there. It's not going to be pretty, but the volume will be there. It is a showdown slate, so getting guys that are going to get volume, you can typically feel pretty good about it. Philip Lindsay at 6,200. We'll have to see if he plays. I really can't go too in-depth here. He's only played 1 game this season. But if he plays, it's certainly going to be a timeshare between him and Melvin Gordon. So it's going to really muddy the waters up a little bit. So just keep your eyes peeled for some injury news on Philip Lindsay, because as of right now, there's really nothing we can go too in-depth on. Kalen Ballage at 5,800. He's really not going to get much work. I mean, if you're just looking at the game logs or just the numbers this season, it's not been like a whole lot of Kalen Ballage here, and I do prefer Pirine over him. But he will get some work in the passing game. He's actually getting 3.5 targets per game so far, 28 receiving yards per game, 3.5 catches per game, and a 7% target share, which is the best out of all the Jets running backs. So I think he's interesting just from a PPR perspective, and this is PPR scoring and DraftKings, and I think he's okay. But again, at 5,800 for Kalen Ballage, I'd rather play Pirine at 1,800, who should get close to double-digit touches in this game. Royce Freeman at 2,800. Again, just keep your eyes peeled for the Phillip Lindsay injury news, because if Lindsay is out, you could look at Freeman to get a couple of carries in this game. Maybe he just somehow gets into the end zone. But outside of that, you really can't expect too much. Melvin Gordon would be the feature back. But P. Ryan here at 1,800, I actually think he's pretty interesting. I think he's a solid value play as well. He had 7 rushing attempts in the last game, only for 24 yards, but he also caught 2 balls on his 2 targets. So if he can get me close to double-digit touches here at $1,800, I don't think that's a bad play whatsoever. So P. Ryan, he is on my value radar, and I feel like we've been doing pretty good on some of these value plays recently. So maybe P. Ryan can continue that trend. But I actually think he's a pretty interesting play, 1,800. Then Le'Veon Bell, you're obviously not playing Le'Veon Bell. Then we'll move on to the wide receiver position. And we'll start up top with Jamison Crowder, 8,200. He is listed as questionable right now, but it sounds like him and Chris Hogan are going to end up playing in this game. I guess they're on the more probable side than they are the questionable side. So that's good news for Jamison Crowder, obviously, and for Sam Darnold as well. In week 1, Jamison Crowder had a pretty strong game. Now, a lot of that came off of a huge play where he scored a long touchdown, but still, he had 12 targets, 7 catches, 115 yards, a 14% target share, had a receiving touchdown, 35% weight opportunity share, and 18% market share of the team's areas. Now, keep in mind, this is only a 1-game sample size, but Jamison Crowder, obviously, going to be the wide receiver 1 here on this offense. Sam Darnold likes throwing it to the slot, and it's a pretty good matchup versus Denver. They're 26 DVA versus the pass, allowing nearly 50 DraftKings points per game to wide receivers, nearly 200 receiving yards per game as well, and over 1.5 receiving touchdowns too. So if Jamison Crowder is good to go, he's obviously going to be an excellent option here, but just going to have to keep your eyes peeled for the injury news once again. Jerry Jeudy at 7,800. So we got Brett Rippon. We got Rippon throwing him the ball. So we'll have to see how that goes. But so far this season, he had 8 targets in week 1, 7 targets in week 2, and he also had 9 targets last week as well. Around 10 fantasy points in each and every single game. And without Courtland Sutton, obviously he's going to get a majority of the volume here, looking at his numbers this season. He's at 8 targets per game, only 4.5 catches per game, but a 22% target share, 52% weight opportunity share, 286 air yards, and over 25% market share of the team's air yards, which is pretty much better than all these receivers besides Chris Hogan in that category. But even Chris Hogan missed some time with some injury as well, so you can't really put too much stock into that. But Jerry Jeudy, I think he's a fine play here, especially if we're going to pair him up with Rippon. And looking at the numbers here for the New York Jets, they are 31st DVA versus the pass, only allowing 31.7 DraftKings points per game to wide receivers and 160 receiving yards. But Jerry Jeudy, he's very talented here, and really no one on the Jets, I think, really has the ability to slow him down too much. It's just a matter if Rippon can get him the ball or not, but we will see. But I think Jeudy is certainly interesting. Braxton Berrios here at 7,200. So he's actually been getting some work, but if Jamison Crowder does return, that's obviously going to cut into his numbers. But so far this season, 5.5 targets per game, 5 catches per game, 61 receiving yards per game, and a 13% target share. Again, though, you're going to have to see if Jamison Crowder is in. I feel like he's going to play, so 7,200 for Braxton Berrios. That's a tough pill to swallow there, so I think you're only going to play him in tournaments just to get different, but I really won't have too much interest in at 7,200 for Braxton Berrios. Brashad Perriman at 5,200. He's just simply out, so you don't have to worry about him. But Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler here, a couple of Broncos wide receivers. So we'll talk about Tim Patrick first. And he's never an exciting play. He's at 4.5 targets per game so far with a 12% target share. Getting a little bit of air yards, though, at 185 air yards thus far with 13.2 ADOT and only 32 receiving yards per game, though. So it's nothing pretty for Tim Patrick, but this is a good matchup for the Denver Broncos. Like I said, the New York Jets do struggle versus the pass. They're second to last in DVOA this season versus that. Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, they're not the most favorite plays in the world. I feel like they're priced up just a little bit. I wish they were just a little bit cheaper, but they're both okay, but it's nothing to get too excited about. I feel like one of these guys can have a decent game. I think KJ Hamler's got a bit more upside. Tim Patrick feels maybe a bit safer, but Hamler has gotten more targets. Now, he's only played 2 games, but 6 targets per game so far with an 11% target share, 8 out of 13.4. It's pretty similar numbers here to Tim Patrick, but I think Hamler's just got a bit more upside there. So if I had to pick between the two, I feel like I'd end up going Hamler, but both are kind of similar plays. Deshaun Hamilton at 3,400, not really going to get a ton of volume here. He's only gotten 1.3 targets per game so far, only half a catch per game and 7 receiving yards with a 5% target share. So I think you can kind of just cross him off your list for the most part. Maybe if you want to get super contrarian, sure. And then dropping down to Chris Hogan here at 3,200. He's another guy that's questionable with Jamison Crowder. I'm assuming he's going to play, and I guess he's playable here. He's getting 5 targets per game so far, 25 receiving yards per game, which is pretty gross. 28% market share of the team's air yards, though, 165 air yards on the season, and a 16% target share. I mean, it's nothing really going to stand out too much, but this is a good matchup versus Denver. They have struggled versus wide receivers this season, so I think Hogan would be all right if he ends up playing, but nothing to get too excited about. Deontay Spencer here, he's 1,200. He's getting half a target per game so far, and he caught one ball last week for 7 yards. So, I mean, you can't really expect much volume here. I mean, I don't know. It feels like in these primetime games, we keep getting random touchdowns. Like we had Nick Boyle score, which I did like Nick Boyle, so that was nice. We had Duvernay score in the kick return. Then we had Sherman scoring that fullback screen or whatever it was. So I don't know. It seems like the primetime games, these coaches like to have these random guys score. So maybe you'll end up seeing Deontay Spencer in the end zone. Everyone's going to say, who the heck played that guy? Well, I don't know. Maybe you got lucky and you threw him in your lineup. Josh Malone at $200. I think he's somewhat interesting here. Because in week 2, the guy did have 6 targets. He got 4 of them for 16 yards. It wasn't anything crazy, but he scored 6.8 fantasy points. If he scored 6.8 fantasy points at $200, you're just jumping in the air, dancing in the streets because he absolutely crushed value. Do I expect that to happen? Probably not. But if he can catch a ball or two at $200, that'll get the job done. And if you play him, you can just open up your entire lineup. You can fit pretty much most people you want in it with a $200 player. So I think he's interesting from a value standpoint. And I think that's pretty much it for the wide receivers. I don't really think you can play any of these other guys. Obviously, you're not playing Courtland Sutton, and these other guys just really aren't going to see time for the most part. So I think we can move on to the tight end position. And by far the best tight end on the slate is Noah Fant, $9,000. I think he'll end up having some decent ownership here. It's a showdown slate, and all these other tight ends are just... Yeah, I know Chris Herndon's there, but he's been wildly disappointing so far this season. But Fant, he's a very talented tight end. We'll have to see if Rippon can get him the ball, but... Still 7 targets per game so far, 4.5 catches per game, a 41% weighted opportunity share, getting some air yards as well, and a 19% target share. And if you're looking at how the Jets have done versus tight ends this year, nearly 15 points per game, 43 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown per game as well. So Noah Fant, he's pretty pricey, but I think he's definitely a solid play. Should be pretty safe. Chris Herndon, 5,400, really not doing too much here. He's getting 5.5 targets per game, which is nice, but 3.3 receptions, 21 receiving yards, 17% target share is okay, 15% market share of the team's air yards, and a 37% weight opportunity share. But this offense is just gross, and I just don't love using options. But again, with this being a showdown slate, obviously I will have to play some Jets, but it's just really gross playing these guys on this offense. But looking at how the Broncos have done versus tight ends, they're allowing 17 points per game to the position, 61 receiving yards, and 0.67 receiving touchdowns. So I think Chris Herndon's fine for the price point. And then if you just want to get a little bit cheap, you got Jake Butt here at $800. He's getting 1 target per game. If he catches a ball or two at $800, you pretty much hit value. So you could maybe look if you need a pump play, Butt's there. Ryan Griffin at $600. He's getting 0.67 targets per game. But again, if these guys catch a ball for like 10 to 15 yards, or maybe they catch a touchdown like Nick Boyle did, it's going to pay off value. So you're only using these guys if you need to just load up on your other guys. If you want to fit in Darnold, Rippon, Judy, Fant, you can use one of these guys. But outside of that, they're not going to grade out super well. Nick Vannett, I mean, even he's $200. He's getting 2 targets per game so far. He's got -3 receiving yards per game on the season. But at $200, just give me a catch or two, and you're going to look at 1 to 2 points, which I will take at $200. But outside of that, I'm not going to have any interest in the other guys. And then going on the defenses, this is one of those games where you can certainly play the defenses because we only have a 40-point over-under, which means going to be some low scores here. An 18.75 implied team total for the Jets and a 21-point implied team total for the Broncos. So you can certainly use both defenses, and I wouldn't even hate the idea of captaining one of these defenses just because I could definitely see some turnovers happening to this game. We could definitely see like a pick six and plenty of sacks as well. So the defenses are totally playable. There's a lot of times I don't like playing the defenses, but this is one of those slates that I'll certainly have some interest in. Then the kickers. Again, a low-scoring game. It could be a lot of field goals here. So Brandon McManus and Sam Ficken are certainly in play here. This is one of those slates where you can use the defenses and you can use the kickers. So don't be afraid to use these guys because I don't expect a ton of touchdowns to be scored here, and it could be a field goal fest and a defense fest as well. So I think that's pretty much going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really do appreciate that. I'm going to head out of here, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the game as much as you possibly can. Hopefully you guys don't have to start too many people from this game in your season log leagues. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys in the next one, and appreciate you guys listening.